everybody, and welcome to Cabaret Secrets. My name's Gary Williams, and today's guest has been embraced by critics and music aficionados, both sides of the Atlantic, winning the Backstage Bistro Award and the Mac Award for the outstanding female New York debut. She's appeared at the Lincoln Center in New York, the Ford Theatre in Hollywood, and recently at London's Crazy Coqs. The Times Square Chronicles described her as a performer who can captivate an audience on many levels: voice, phrasing, acting, persona, sensuality, and physical beauty. It said she has that extra wisp in her singing that leaves you breathless. Stacy Sullivan, welcome to Cabaret Secrets.
Thank you so much. After the introduction, I'm like, wow.
We're in London now. You came to us from your home of New York. I'm dying to know what you think. Do you think Americans are better at cabaret than we Brits?
Well, I'm new to the London scene, the British cabaret scene, but I was at the open mic night at the Crazy Coqs last night. I was very impressed. Major talent and lots of storytelling and great singing, good arrangements. And I saw a lot of truth, very honest performances. So I'm not really drawn to showing off. I really love storytelling and the lyric. And I think if you talk to a lot of New Yorkers, they would say the best actors, the best performers they've ever seen are British. Maybe it's just we.
What do you mean when you say truth?
I don't like showing off, really. I like people who get up and tell stories that mean something to them, that they're not using a script, that it's coming from a very real place, and it's a story that means something to them, that someone hasn't put on them. And look at me is not very attractive. And that's one of the reasons I love British audiences, because it seems like the first night I was here, I was pushing a little bit, and the British audience was kind of laid back and said, we'll come to you if you give us something to enjoy. And so the second night, I laid back a little bit. I wasn't so needy. I'm not drawn to needy performers either, so I appreciated what the audience was doing. The second night, I laid back a little bit, and the audience came to me, because I didn't think I needed something from them. You know, when you go to lunch and you know someone's going to ask you for money, just puts you off a little bit, makes you a little more. Does that make sense?
Completely.
Yeah.
How do the audiences differ in your experience because I asked Steve Ross this question, and he said they don't differ at all. But in my experience, I work a lot on cruise ships. That's where I'm singing mostly to Americans, and then I'll work on some ships where it's all Brits. I find the audience is very, very different.
I do too. And it may just be the difference between the Crazy Coqs and other venues, because this is a very special venue. Very attentive audience, very disciplined, very smart, very quiet. They want to hear every word. I think the audiences that I've experienced in LA and New York are very rowdy, very fun, like standing ovations and loud applause and whoops. And I've not experienced that as much in London. But
do you change your show then based on where you're playing?
I think you have to listen to your audience. If I walked into the Metropolitan Room in New York, say, and it's full of family and friends, and they're just whooping and screaming at the top, I may be higher energy, more out there, more off-the-cuff comments, more talking to the audience. My opening night here in London, no one knew me. I didn't know a single person in the audience. So they're just checking me out, kind of figuring me out. So I stuck to the script. I tried to be as in the moment as possible. No little side comments, just back to the text, just sing the songs. And about halfway through, I felt the audience go, okay, you're all right. We're going to come to you. So I think we definitely have to listen to your audience. The energy, I know as an actor, you match someone's energy when you're doing scene work. You match someone, and if I'm doing a scene for a film, it's very different than doing a scene in the theater. You have to be aware of the medium, and be aware of the audience, and matching their energy, I think, is crucial, don't you?
Well, for an audience, sometimes when I'm performing, I'm trying to motivate them to be more lively, or at a certain point at the show, I might want them to settle down a little bit. I'm trying to perhaps influence their energy I'm trying to lead it, I guess, rather than let them lead it. Depends on where I'm playing, but I also know when I guess when I'm beat. I also know when all right, there's a dominant feeling. And this is usually at sort of corporate events or private parties or something where that they haven't come to see us, and we have to bend a lot more to what they want. You think, okay, it's that kind of they all want to party. Okay, I'm going to forget that set. I'm going to do this stuff, and I'm going to give them what they want. But usually in a theatre or a cabaret room, it's usually a little bit more. I feel we've got a little bit more control.
Well, I think that there's also a respect level for your audience. I think that I can manipulate, or I can influence an audience, but my respect level is so high for this audience, this particular audience at the Crazy Coqs, that I'm probably listening to them more than usual, maybe because I appreciate. And there are also different colors in a show. When I'm playing to an audience that maybe isn't responding, I kind of internalize it and say, maybe it's me. It's not them, it's me. So I go deeper, or I'll find something that I think, well, maybe this will work. Because if that's not working, then maybe that. And usually when that happens, I find a color that I've never used before. It's a brand new shade in my palette. It happened the second night here. The first night was a wonder. I mean, we really got together. Second night, I didn't think I was reaching them. And so I dug deeper, and I found a darker color in the Peggy Lee show than I've ever found before. And I was so happy. At the end of the show, they wouldn't stop applauding. They were just a quiet audience. They showed their appreciation at the end. And if I'd gotten, I think as performers, sometimes we take it personally.
Of course we do.
During a show, we think, oh, they don't like me. And I didn't do that. I just thought, I'll find something else. And I kept digging deeper. And I believe in the material. I believe in the show so much that I felt on some level I was getting to them. But I just trusted my instincts. I went deeper. And then, yeah, it was a great experience. A very different crowd than I've ever had. But every audience is different. Every audience is going to give you a different feel. And if I'm doing my job, I'm going to find something for them.
The Peggy Lee show that you're doing here, obviously there's a strong theme there.
Yeah. Do
you always create a show with a strong theme, a strong hook?
I had not done that before. I did a show. I've been doing shows for 20 years, but I was raising my kids. I have 2 children, and I was kind of a dilettante. I wasn't doing shows very often, maybe one a year, but they weren't really themed. They were just kind of like my favorite songs at the time.
If you're not doing so many shows, you can always rely on your friends to come and support you. You don't have to worry about that.
I wasn't doing it very often, and probably not very well. There was a man named Sidney Meyer. Do you know of Sidney? In New York City, he runs Don't Tell Mama. He's run it for the last 20 years, but I had never met him, and he saw me perform in a show. And he came up to me afterwards, and I was honored to meet him. I was so excited to meet the Sidney Meyer. And he barely even said hello. He just looked me in the eye, and he said, "You have to do Peggy Lee." I really wasn't familiar with Peggy Lee, but if Sidney Meyer told me that, it's like I need to listen. I've been working on this show for about 5 years, and it grew and changed, and I brought in a director, but I knew it was rich. I knew the material was rich, but the key for me was not doing Peggy Lee, doing me, doing Stacy Sullivan, telling Peggy Lee's story, and every story that I chose about her was really my story. So even though I'm talking about Peggy, I'm talking about me.
And do we know as an audience how it relates to you?
Yes. I mean, I did a show with one of her co-writers 20 years ago. And I did a song called Angels on Your Pillow that he wrote with Peggy. And I sang it to my kids as a lullaby. So there was a connection. And then I started researching her life, and I found so many similarities, which you really can with any if you have that connection, that emotional connection, you can. There's so much that's been written about her that there was. I mean, it was rich. The soil was so rich with stories that I could pick and choose, and she recorded over 1,000 songs. So I could pick the songs I wanted to sing.
So when you're putting the show together, anybody who's read the Cabaret Secrets book will know that I suggest to people when they're starting out to use a template. I'd realized over the years, once I examined the work that I'd been doing, that I always tended to open the show with a particular type of number. The second number was always, I'd always close the show in a particular way, and there was, even though the songs would be different, the structure would be the same. Does that resonate with you at all?
It does resonate with me because the Peggy Lee took me 5 years to work on. And my new show is based on Marian McPartland, piano jazz. And it was very interesting because I didn't even realize I was doing it, but I was using Peggy as a template, the Peggy Lee show as a template for the Marian McPartland show. And it took me 5 years to put Peggy together, but Marian McPartland came together.
5 minutes.
So, well, that wouldn't be very good, would it? But it came together so quickly because I had something that had worked for me, a template, if you will. It's also not just a jazz set. We're just not going to sing a bunch of songs. This actually has some story to it. And that's what separates cabaret from just a concert to me. And I love cabaret so much because I go see sets now, jazz sets or just music sets, and people just singing songs and tiny little bits of patter, linking them. And oftentimes, because I've been so spoiled in cabaret, I leave thinking I want more. I want a story. I love cabaret for that reason. It has the narrative, which you feel like maybe you learned a little bit, about the performer, and then maybe about another performer or the music itself. I worked with a great director in New York. Her name is Sandra Lee. And Sandra was the youngest member of the Actors Studio. She taught for Stella Adler for 30 years. But she was also the original Tiger Lily. She was Jerome Robbins' muse. She's a wonderful performer, but she's about yay high. She's a tiny little lady, but she's powerful and, just has opinions. And she came in and really helped me with the Peggy Lee, and she kind of kicked my ass. She came and saw my Peggy Lee show after I'd been doing it for a while, and I was realizing that I was going to have so much of it was improvised that I had a feeling that I would be doing this show until I die. And I was going through a little bit of a crisis because I realized I was having a hard time keeping it fresh. It was starting to sound da 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 da. I was saying things the same way I'd said them each time. So she really whipped me into shape, and I started going to her acting class twice a week and performing in front of these 20-year-old kids. What she had me do was my patter from my shows as a monologue. No songs, just the patter. So it really helped me figure out what are you saying and how does it link to the song that gets you into the next part of the story. Because we're like babies with security blankets with the songs, because we're singers, we're singers. And really, it's just patter. It's just a few words linking the song. She said, no, it's not. This is the meat. This is the story. And to strip away the music and have to do your patter as a monologue in front of these 20-year-old kids, these serious actors who weren't singers, they weren't musicians, it just stripped me bare. I felt like I was naked up there for months and months and months. I would do that. And I did the same thing with the Marian McPartland show.
Very unnerving for you. I mean, you must have been terrified. But did you sweat?
I did, and I still do. I actually debuted my Marian McPartland show out in California at the Boston Court Theater. And then I did it again at the Green Space in New York for Jonathan Schwartz and WNYC. I'd already performed it a couple of times, but I had not performed it as a monologue in front of my class. I wasn't nervous in California. I wasn't nervous at WNYC. I got before those 20-year-old kids, and I was sweating bullets. Couldn't remember where I was. And it kind of does keep you in the moment, too. when you don't have the songs between to think about what's coming next. You know, you're kind of on cruise control during the songs. You're like, you can think while you're singing about what's going to be the next bit, and you don't have that. You don't have that time, so you have to be completely present about what you're saying right now.
So how did your patter change after working on it like that for a while?
You figure out what works. And also, Sandra got me to really script my shows. Like, I've used the word really with you about a dozen times. If I had scripted this interview, I would only use really maybe once, if at all. So when I scripted it, I cut out all of the fat. And
so you before that, it wasn't really scripted. I mean, you sort of had the, because some people tell me that they don't like to work with a script. They like to work with kind of bullet points. They kind of know where they're going. You know, they got the main gist of what this is about. Was it similar for you before? You sort of knew the gist?
Yes. Before I kind of knew the gist, but I don't think I'm smart enough to do things. I've seen you perform last night, just a very brief moment. It's the first time I've seen you perform, but you're so bright, and you can think on your feet, and you were so good. I have a feeling you could do bullet points. For me, I think it works better, at least at this point in my career, to be scripted, because I'm kind of early in my career. I'm kind of new at this. I feel like there's so much I need to learn. There's so many places I need to grow. And I'll see where it takes me. Maybe bullet points will work for me in the next show.
Well, I've been doing this for, quite a long time, and for me, it's every word is scripted.
You too? Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that. It didn't sound like it at all last night.
And that's, to me, the challenge is working with the script. That's the way I do it. But the challenge is making the script sound for real every time I do it. That's the work.
That freshness of thought. And that is the real work.
But it's easy. It's made easier with having different audiences every night, because audiences, they do give. I think if it's like actors, isn't it? It's reacting. If we're listening, we need to listen, don't we, as actors, as performers, and rather than listening to another actor on the stage that I'm having a dialogue with, the dialogue, even though it's mostly one-sided, is with the audience, and I'm listening to them, and I'm changing what I'm doing a little bit, even if it's just the inflections and the tone, based on what they're giving me back.
And because the audiences have been so quiet at Crazy Coqs, they're not giving, it's an energy. Or even what's really nice is when you can see the faces and expression. Listening to their expressions can help you sometimes too. But a lot of audiences are not aware of how their expression affects a performer. Because I have been performing since I was a very small child. And after all of these years, I do know that the expression they have on their face may be 180 degrees from what they're thinking. And that's been a real lesson, because I think someone hates me in the audience, and they'll come up and tell me how moved they were. They're just not capable of showing their expressions, and that's why we're the performers and they're not.
Yeah, good point.
And sometimes I think as performers we ask too much of them, because they're not there to give me anything. They've paid their money. I'm the one in charge of giving. How dare me expect anything from these people who are paying? And I think that sometimes we do that. Oh, can you please just... What I will do, though, is I will look around an audience and I will find that friendly face. And, well, occasionally, when I haven't been able to find the friendly face, I will find a silhouette of a face that's backlit, so I can't see their expression, and just picture them loving me.
Yeah. It's funny, if I'm doing a show and it's really not going very well, it just makes me up my energy. I mean, it's much harder work and it's exhausting. I'd rather get that energy from the audience, but if they're not giving it to me, I got to turn it up.
But it was interesting the other night. I usually do that too, but the other night the audience was so quiet. And the first audience had been very, very responsive. And I got really dark. I kind of went into a dark place, but it's Peggy Lee. You can go dark, and that's what I mean. It brought a new color, because it was just kind of sad, and my energy changed. But I was like, I want to use that color again.
Nice to listen and respond to the audience.
It's the first time I'd gone there as an actor. And it was a good place to go. And as I was going into that place, the energy was so different than I'd ever used before. And I said, this is the right energy. An up energy is not right for Peggy Lee at this moment.
It's like you said at the beginning, truth.
Truth. And that's the way I was feeling at that moment. Instead of trying to pretend like I wasn't disappointed, that the audience wasn't with me like I thought the other audience had been, just go with it. And you know what? Peggy Lee was disappointed in her life. And all of a sudden it was so true. And I think it was during Johnny Guitar that it was like she was so disappointed in Dave Barber. It's like, this works. This feels real. Oh, that's what I'm going for.
It's hard to record an album and for it to actually make money, and you've done 5 of them. How do you budget the things? I mean, do you just write it off and think, well, this is an indulgence, or it's going to be for help publicize the show and it's going to help spread the word? Or do you think, no, these have to make money?
I've never made any money off of my albums, not yet. I think it's
You're not the only one.
I think they've led to gigs. Yeah. They've led to jobs. I mean, I'm in London. Yeah, that's right. And it's partly because of an album I did, the Peggy Lee album. But no,
it gets radio play. It spreads the word. I think it's your calling card.
It is my calling card. But it was also an education, because as a singer, a performer live, you don't know what you sound like. You don't know what's working. So when I started making albums, like, oh, that sounds really bad. Don't do that anymore. Don't do it. And I actually, after 5 albums...
Why didn't anybody tell me?
After 5 albums, I think I finally developed my style. It's the 10,000 hours.
Yeah.
And the only way I was going to get my 10,000 hours was by doing albums. And I just went and borrowed the money. And then my albums were very expensive. I spent but it's prioritizing, you know.
You have to spend money, because if you don't, you can tell.
Yeah, but I don't have a lot of. I mean, my husband basically went and borrowed the money because he knew I needed it as a creative outlet, as a stay-at-home mom who had a career before I started having children. I actually worked a lot, but then I was at home every day with kids, and it was very hard.
Do you feel proud of your albums, particularly the early ones? When you look back, do you think, yeah, they still sound great, or not? How do you feel looking back on your work?
I made a lot of mistakes. I was trying to find myself, but you can't be ashamed of what you learned. I don't love my early out. There's a couple moments I go, oh, that sounded pretty good. Or I'll hear a moment and I go, that's when I started to find myself. And unfortunately, my learning experience is out there for the world to see. And, it's like all your mistakes.
Can we a recall? We recall that album.
I tried. My first album, I tried to recall. But then someone told me that my first album at the beginning helped her get through her chemo treatments.
Oh, wow.
She loved my first album. Yeah, how dare me tell her that that's a bad album? Well, she loved it. You know, you can't tell people that something they appreciate and enjoy is bad. They like it.
Yeah, doesn't mean that it's not bad. But one of my first album, God, it was a terrible thing. And what's so funny is that I honestly cannot listen to it now. I just couldn't. Yeah. It's just too agony. It's painful. But a few years ago, probably 10 years ago, you know, I found it. Oh, look at this cassette tape, you know, and I played this thing. And I was shocked at how, I mean, this isn't just a performer saying, oh, darling, it really wasn't. I mean, flat as a fart on some of these notes, like awful. I'm like, why didn't the guy producing it didn't tell me? I don't know how.
Auto-tune.
But people, exactly. And I think I want to stretch it to its limits. But people would still say to, they don't say it now, thank goodness, but they would still say, oh, we love that. And I realized that they loved that album because of the songs that I sang. And most people, I think, you know, can't really tell the difference between a bit of a note that's, you know, the intonation's off a little bit. Yeah. They just think, well, I love that song and I love that album.
And you put all of your favorite songs on your first album.
That's true,
it's
and
so
everybody's
sad.
favorites, right?
Have you noticed how different it is with photographs? Photographs that I thought were terrible when I was 20, I look at now and go, oh my gosh, I didn't appreciate it.
If only I looked like that now,
Yeah,
right?
But albums are not that way.
It's really true. It's really true. Yeah, we all look at ourselves in the mirror and think, "Oh God, look at this."
God.
But I know that I'll be looking back at a photograph of myself now in 10 years' time and think, "Oh, I wish I looked that." Yeah, I know. We need to remind ourselves of this.
Even pictures 2 years ago, I think I didn't like that at the time. Man, I'm aging. I wish I looked like that now, 2 years ago. But albums are not like that. They don't age as gracefully.
How do you decide what to put on an album? Is it do you record the particular show that you're doing at a time, or do the albums need a theme?
The first album was just, I need to record because I need to know how I sound. So I put all my favorite songs on it. It didn't really have a theme. I did a show called At the Beginning, and that was the title of my first album. I got the MAC Award for Female New York Debut from that show. And yeah, that was a show. Now, the second album was me trying a new thing. I had a manager who thought I should be a country western artist because I'm from Oklahoma. I have the pedigree. And I really pushed the limits on that. She kept seeing me as a country western singer, and one of the critics of that album said it was a combination of cabaret and country with serious jazz pop undertones. So I was
Something for everyone.
all over the board. But I like that album. It's called West on 40.
I think that's where I first heard you. I think it was on that album you recorded I Feel the Earth Move.
Yes.
With the Carole King.
Yeah.
Great.
Thanks. That was my second album. The third album was a Christmas album.
I'm glad I've heard these things because
Yeah, it's
you're
really
making them
neat.
sound much worse than they're actually very, very good.
Why,
You're being extremely modest.
Thank you. Why, thank you. The third album was a Christmas album, which I'm kind of proud of that one. I like that one.
Christmas albums are tricky, aren't they? Because I wanted to record a Christmas album for ages, but there's a very short window when we're going to sell them, isn't there?
But they keep coming back.
There's
every
always
year.
one every year.
Do you have a Christmas collection at your house of CDs?
Yeah, of course.
And I bring them out every year. Don McLean. I've got these same, but I want to hear the same albums. And I think that's what happens with a Christmas album. There are people who bring it out every year.
Yeah, it's part of the season.
Rebirth.
Isn't it? Yeah.
Rebirth every year. So that one's actually done pretty well. I did an album called It's a Small Town, which has some nice moments, but it really kind of came together for me on the Peggy Lee album, It's a Good Day, because I think I didn't. Well, there's a great quote about Picasso. He went to a kindergarten, and he looked at the teacher. She was showing them the artwork of all of the kids in kindergarten. He said, all of your students are geniuses. How do you do it? And she says, I know when to take it away from them. And we were talking about that earlier. With the Peggy Lee album, I was opening the Peggy Lee Museum in Wimbledon, North Dakota. And I was recording a song that Peggy had written for the people of North Dakota that had never been heard. They didn't know it existed. No one had ever recorded it. So
You didn't just make it up, did you?
No.
Look what I found.
Look what I found. I'm sure her family would love that. They actually gave it to me because they had invited me to do this. So I had it in my head. I had 3 weeks to get this album made, and I just had to get that song recorded for the people of North Dakota. So I really threw that album together so quickly. But I had recorded 4 before that, so I kind of knew what I was doing at that point because I had a limited time. Someone knew when to take it away from me. I didn't have time to go in and fix it. So it's not a perfect album. Where It's a Small Town, I tried to make it perfect. And it's not. There's beauty in imperfection. So
Thank God for all of us.
Thank God for all of us. That's what makes things beautiful. That's something that's a little different, you know. So I went in and I did it very quickly. I recorded the whole album in 2 days. I did my vocals in 3 hours. But I had the most loving people surrounding me and lifting me. And the musicians, Bucky Pizzarelli, came in at the last minute.
Amazing.
It was incredible. And we knew these songs so well.
Bucky probably worked with Peggy Lee.
He did. He was in the Broadway musical Peg.
Right.
We called him and he was there in an hour to play on the everything. It was kind of a divine situation where everything came together.
And presumably you had a producer who you could really trust.
No, I've produced all 5 of my albums.
Now, for me, I need to have I feel I'm too close to it. You know, I need to have somebody else there who I really trust, who shares my vision, but can say to me, you know, maybe my intonation might be, you know, you're a little bit flat on that note, or you know, maybe try phrasing, or actually you're not hearing this, but it'd be better if you phrase that line with the horns, because that's how the arranger's done it, and you've not noticed that.
I've always used my engineers.
Right.
Bill Moss was my engineer on the Peggy Lee. Gabe Moffat.
And is that a budgetary thing, seriously? Because I used to use the engineer, because you know, it's cheaper. There's somebody they're there anyway. They kind of know, you know, and they can give me a bit of feedback and so on. But later on, I found it was better for me to let the engineer be the engineer and have somebody just sitting there listening. I mean, if you had the money, say, would you prefer to have a producer, or does it work the way it is?
It depends on. I'm sure it depends on the engineer. They usually have great ears, and if you use someone at a good studio, they know what they're doing. I also had John Weber, my musical director, and Steve Doyle, my bass player, who've become my. A critic called them recently my lethal assist. They are wonderful men. We've traveled together. They're my band. They know me very well. They know my voice. They know what. And my husband was great. I just had these wonderful people surrounding me, kind of, you know, just telling me the truth. And what I like to do when I'm recording an album is just lay down like five different, sing it through 5 times, and then go in and sample from the different.
And do you do are you shielded off in a booth with your vocals and the band are all together, or is everybody isolated?
I've done it both ways. Sometimes the first time through with the band in the same room is the way to go. Other times I'll isolate myself and do it after they're gone. I
find that what works for me now is that I have the band usually not entirely isolated, but kind of a little bit. Depends on the studio. I certainly will be isolated. I will sing it along. It's like 3, 4, or 5 times. So we'll do like 3, 4, 5 takes. Everybody just do it and do it again and do it again and do it again. But I'm not worried about the vocal. This is all for the band. But I'm singing and I'm doing it properly. But this is really, the focus is on the band. Then we cut together the best the best band takes. We're not worried about the vocal at all. We're just, well, that was good there. And usually there aren't too many cuts. It says, well, we'll use the first half of this take and the second half of that take, or let's just use the last 4 bars of this take. And then we see what the vocal is. Then, you know, that's the band done. And then now let's listen to that mashed up take, and let's hear how the vocal is and see what we need to do. And sometimes we do the whole vocal again, sometimes not.
And don't you find that you often go back to those first takes when the band was there, when it was live?
For sure.
Yeah. Something about that magic of when it was live.
That's right.
Yeah, I'm getting better at the recording.
I'll tell you something I learned in recording is not to use auto-tune. I'd done all my albums, I'd never used it. You know, just if something's flat, just do that bit again, you know, and put that in. And then I did have the opportunity. I was in a studio, the guy knew auto-tune well, and went to town. And my intonation's all right. But he was like, oh, look, you could see on the screen that it wasn't perfect. So he was, you know, very easy just to, tweak this, tweak that, and it sounds, it sounds a bit weird. It has this kind of electronic kind of sound. Doesn't have this kind of natural warmth. And B, it's this kind of mechanical thing. You know, there's this thing that there's can be beauty in imperfection, as you said. And sometimes I think of the dancing of Gene Kelly. You know, that a dancer may say, well, it was, you know, his lines might not be perfect. He might not have the best pointing toes, but my God, there's a lot of style and charisma. Yeah, well,
even the last album I did, I gave the project over to Bill and John to edit after I'd left for LA. I didn't have the time to do it. But they, you know, sometimes they auto-tuned on some of the things I was improvising to a different note than I sang. They thought I was singing this, and I wasn't. So even when I hear it now, I say, that wasn't the note I was singing. Because in my head is a different note than is on that album, which is very odd. I don't like it. No. I think the better you get at it, the less auto-tune I find that I need. You too?
Well, as I say, after that, I mean, I don't use autotune at all. But what I will do is re-sing a vocal and just put that in. What I have found though is that for me, my major breakthrough was realizing after doing loads of albums, was realizing that I simply can't tell, and I don't think any of us, I mean, the people that I work with anyway, we just can't really be as discerning as I would like for us all to be.
Yes.
While we're doing it, while we're in the moment. And what I did on the last album I recorded was we did it, we went back to it a couple of weeks later to do some just clean up drop-ins and whatever, and then it was all ready to go, but I put it away. And I went back to it a few months later, like 3 or 4 months later. I tried to resist the urge to listen, because we've done these things, we care, we just want to listen all the time. I put it away, and then I went back with fresh ears, and there were a few things which stuck out like a sore thumb, and I thought, wow, why didn't I hear that before? Why didn't I hear that before? Not much, not too many things, but a few things, important things, which would have driven me mad, like for the rest of my life, listening to that thing. And so went back again for one last day and just tweaked these little bits, and then put it out. And then it's something that I feel I know that I'll feel happier with it for longer, not forever, but for longer.
Smart. No, you may be happy with it forever though. Smart to put it away for a little while and come back to it. I'm recording a new album in September, and I'm so...
We should duet. Thank you for asking.
What's that?
I said we'll do a duet. Thank you for asking.
You're flying to New York, right?
That's right.
So you're going to record with...
Just expenses. Just pay me expenses.
I'm so excited. I'm so excited.
What's the album?
It's the Marion McPartland project. It's called On the Air. On the Air. But I'm so excited to get back in the studio. Do you love it?
I do love it, but I also love doing live stuff, and I love recording live albums.
I've never done that.
Why not?
A little bit of my OCD. No, I'm not OCD, but I am a perfectionist. And live recordings, I
think you might be. I mean, do you ever record your shows just off the desk to listen to?
Well, I did On the Air for WNYC in New York. Jonathan Schwartz introduced it, and they filmed it, 5 cameras, and they recorded it, and I listened to it, and it was very hard for me. I had to cut 4 of the songs from the show. They're embedding it in their website at WNYC.
We'll check it out.
Jonathan channel. So I went back in and I remixed it. We remixed the sound. We cut some of the dialogue. We cut 4, like I said, 4 songs. But still, there are a couple notes that just hurt. The opening of the really busy medley I'm so flat on the last note. Getting to see the light. It's just painful.
Isn't it funny how we don't realize at the time?
And I looked at the engineer when we remixed it. I said, can you auto-tune that? And he said, no, we can't auto-tune a live recording. I said, are you sure? Yeah. I said, can we just put some mashed potatoes on top of it? Can we
Let's just get a load of applause. Just overdub cheers and screams from the audience.
Bring up the bass really high. Just fade me out.
I think albums suit moods. The albums I listen to the most are those which, are nice and relaxing, or they're up and they make me want to dance around. A show is a different thing, because a show really has all the moods. You're taking people from, a nice relaxed place to lively, and then you're taking them to a very dark, sad place. And, I think people don't necessarily want to experience all of those moods in one sitting of an album. So it's quite tricky when putting it together. And do they want the chat? Probably not, because they might want to listen to a song over and over, but they're not going to want to listen to you introduce it over and over.
But that's what I miss about albums. Great albums had a through line. They were telling a story,
a theme.
But now when you're buying one song on iTunes, people can make their own albums of their favorite songs. If they want a mood, they can pick this song from that album, this song, which is great. But I still feel a responsibility when I'm putting together an album to tell that story. You asked if my albums were based on shows, and the ones that weren't were the Christmas album. And actually, only 2 of them have been based on shows. The others are more like a mood kind of.
Better for it, I think.
Yeah.
You mentioned iTunes, and thank goodness that we've got this digital outlet now.
Yeah.
It's changed everything, hasn't it?
Yeah. Is it a good thing?
I think it's a great thing because, I mean, I don't know about you, but I love getting my statements through. I think I get them once every quarter, every 6 months, which show all the plays that my track, all the downloads, whether it's on Spotify that someone's just listened to it or whether it's people have bought it. And I can see all over the world that they're like, oh, that's cool. Look, there's 26 people in Japan listen to this track, in the last few months.
I think you must be making more money than I am.
What I didn't tell you is that for every listen, I got 0.0002p. So believe me, I'm not making any money.
0.002p.
Really, but but it's what we're not. If we were trying to get rich, we'd be in a different business, right?
Really would.
I think our validation is just that people are out there listening to our music. How cool! I think it's wow. There's some people in Mexico downloaded my album. I don't know who they are. How do they know why? But that's nice, isn't it?
Really nice.
There are people ironing to my music all over the world.
And as a person who had been singing live, I did a lot of theater. When I put my first album out, someone from Hong Kong, some record store, ordered, I think, 200 copies. And I can't tell you what that did. You know exactly what that did.
Isn't it
for me.
cool?
I'm singing in Hong Kong right now, and I'm not there. That was the weirdest feeling, because when you've been singing live, that's the only way someone could ever hear you do your work. Yeah, so I get that.
So even though we're not making much money off the albums or any money at all, just the fact what they're doing for us and spreading the word, it's nice, isn't it?
There's the potential too. There's someone talking about using one of my songs in a film right now, and I think it's going to be a great film.
Right.
But you think if one of my songs were right to go in that film, people would be seeing a film and hearing me sing. There's potential in anything that we're doing, that someone somewhere is going to hear that and use it, and where it's going to reach a greater audience.
A friend of mine called me a few months ago, and he was watching this daytime TV we've got over here, daytime TV show called Bargain Hunt. And he said,
love Bargain Hunt.
Do you know Bargain Hunt?
I love Bargain Hunt.
They used one of my tracks on Bargain Hunt, and it was so funny. Yeah, I mean, it's just so funny because, it's a small thing, but it's just that, that's funny. You're just watching the TV, this thing, I recognise that voice.
I love it.
The Dizzy Heights, Bargain Hunt. I don't care what your movie's about, you're not going to beat that.
Never. Now, how could you beat Bargain Hunt? I mean, really. I think we are the luckiest people in the world, the ones of us who are working, who get to do what we love to do for a living. But we're also gamblers. I mean, there is that chance, that something you do could reach a wider audience. And I think that we all have a little bit of that in the back of our heads, is, it could be greater than this, but if it's not, that's okay too. Because we actually get to enjoy what we do. I mean, how many people get to go to work and have people applaud for them? Most people go to work and never get thanked, and we get to make people cry and laugh, and, we're really lucky people.
Thank you for listening to this Cabaret Secrets podcast. If you've got any comments or questions, please visit cabaretsecrets.com, where you'll also find details of the Cabaret Secrets book, an indispensable guide on how to create your own show, travel the world, and get paid to do what you love.